Good morning, everyone. Today we from the Near Infrared Spectroscopy Research Center for Agriculture, Product and Food. We'll share you our training short course. So this morning our lecturer is Sneha Sharma, who is our doctoral candidate uh, in the Department of Agricultural Engineering, Faculty of Engineering, King Mongkut Institute of Technology, Ladkrabang. So please, Sneha Sharma, please tell us what is your plan to give lecture to us today.
Hello everyone, I'm Sneha Sharma and today we are going to have a lecture on machine learning approaches for spectral analysis. So I and Mr. Sumesh Kesi, we are here to share our experience and learning about machine learning and how we can analyze our data, and I will give an introduction about the machine learning approaches, and Sumesh will teach uh, on how to program using MATLAB. So okay, we can start. uh, I think everyone is present already, right? So we can start the lecture. Okay, so everyone can see, right? Is okay?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
But
I
may we have excuse me,
Yes,
may we have to see your face a little?
my face and my screen both at the same time is will be difficult, Ajahn.
Oh, okay. So we will see your face later.
Okay, sure. I would like to ask everyone to please participate and then ask any question or anything that you would like to know about the while I'm teaching, or you can just say while the lecture is going on. It's okay. We don't have a strict question and answer session. So if someone want to know a little bit more, they can raise the question. Okay, so this is our tentative schedule. For me, I will have the theory part of Introduction to Machine Learning, Supervised and Unsupervised Algorithm, Support Vector Machines, Random Forest, K Nearest Neighbor, Linear Discriminant Analysis, and finally Artificial Neural Network. And for the programming part, Sumesh will teach about the MATLAB basic first, and then he will cover the classification and regression analysis using SVM, RF, LDA, KNN, and ANN. So this the programming part will be programming as well as analysis of the results. So before we start, like everyone is familiar with the term of data science. Am I correct? Hello?
Please speak again.
Everyone is familiar with the term data science.
Mm, I think I can translate it. I can translate it, but I don't know really the meaning. The meaning.
Okay, so everything that we are doing in our experiment that include the data, it is all the part of data science. So data science is basically a giant umbrella that cover all the disciplines such as big data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data mining. So these terms might sound a little bit complicated, but it is not, because we use it in everyday life, but we have to know like which is our data. So basically we use big data for spectral analysis. We have several rows, several columns, and there are more example of big data. And in every step in artificial intelligence, we use big data. For machine learning, we use big data. For data mining, we use big data for the analysis. So this is the main structure of data science, and we are doing everything under data science. So everyone is clear about this one, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the next one is machine learning. So in machine learning, before, the traditional approach that we use is like we use our computer to get the output from the data and the algorithm before, right? So we input our data and then we input the data in the algorithm and then we get the output. But in machine learning, what happens is we give the data as well as output to the computer, and then the computer start to develop the algorithm, and then we use that algorithm to for the further analysis, for the prediction. So basically machine learning approach give computer the ability to learn without being explicitly learned. This sentence is the overall gist of machine learning. So I will give a small example, like everyone can try, like the example of machine learning in Google. You can type the who is the president of United States of America in Google, and then you can type it in other source like Internet Explorer or Mozilla or anything. Then you will see by yourself the output that machine learning from Google give to us, and the machine learning from other Internet Explorer or Mozilla Firefox, it gives to us. You can try it now if you want to see the result. The machine learning from Google, it gives us the exact picture of Joe Biden, who is the president of United States of America right now. But for Mozilla and Internet Explorer, the result come in second or third output. So from here, you can get a little bit idea about how well developed is the machine learning of Google, because we just want to know who is the president and it gives us the picture. Do you understand what I mean?
I think so. A little.
Yeah, Adhan can try to type anything that you want, and you can see the result in two different thing in Google and in another one. So the gist is like machine learning is well developed and very advanced for Google, so we can get exactly what we want to see. So that in like here, the difference is because Google machine learning can take the input as the individual character. It can decipher the input as not only the string but as the individual thing. So as a user, what we want is a precise result, and we can get the precise result from the machine learning. Okay, so we will move to the statistical example. Like, okay, anyone can say the output that we out the answer of this in this example, right? What is the answer for 6, and then what is the answer for this one? Anyone can guess, right? Can anyone tell me the answer of this one?
I am trying.
How about May? How about L? Piece of.
Am I right? 26? I'm wrong.
A little bit wrong, Ajahn, but it's like anyone else can try. Want to share their answer?
24 ไหมอ่ะ
Okay. So here basically the answer is 24 because it's like this one is the 5 multiplication of 4, 4 multiplication of 3, and then we want the answer 24, 6 multiplication of 4. So, but this is the simple example that we can analyze by ourselves. But if what happen if we have like a decimal number, it will be very difficult for anyone to understand like how what is the answer or what is the output that we can get. So in this case, we apply machine learning for this kind of data so that we can know like what is the output that it can learn from the data that we input. There are basically three main component of machine learning. Like first one is the features. Features is for the this describe the relevant object in the domain. That means the feature of your sample. If someone is if someone want to do the classification analysis, then they have the features like the how you represent your samples. And the important part is in machine learning is the feature representation. And the second one is the task represent like what is the problem and what do you want to do. So the tasks represent regression or classification or like identification or feature extraction, what you want to get from the input. And finally is the modeling. Modeling is the output of machine learning algorithm that is applied to the training data. So what kind of problem can be solved by machine learning? So basically there are three types of problem that we want to solve by using machine learning, that is binary classification, multi-class classification, and regression analysis. And moving toward like learning method, how the machine learning learn from our input data. So there are two type of learning methods: supervised learning and unsupervised learning. So I think everyone is familiar with supervised and unsupervised learning. So supervised learning is when we give the label to the training data. Like if we want to classify a group of sample as A and a group of sample as B, then we already when we give the input, we already label the data. Like number one sample is A, number two sample is A, number five sample is B. So like this way. So when we label our training data, that type of learning is called supervised learning. And there are several type of supervised learning, and from which we get like SVM, support vector machine, random forest, discriminant analysis, and k nearest neighbor. These type of supervised learning that I have applied on during my thesis. So today I will focus on these four main type of machine supervised learning methods. And also there are like unsupervised learning, which means learning from unlabeled data. So if the if we don't know what is the sample number one represent which category or which class, and then we use the sample only, like we use the only data set, we will not label the data set, and then we want the machine learning to find what, like how it can separate. So this type of learning is called unsupervised learning. We don't we provide the data, but that is not labeled data. So there are two types of unsupervised learning method. One is cluster analysis and the second one is principal component analysis. This is like a graphical representation of supervised learning. So first we have the input raw data, and then there is a supervisor, which are us. We supervise that data as the training data set and desired output data set, and we label the data first into the class or into the, like we give the value to the data, and after that we apply the algorithm. And this algorithm represent like SVM, RF or LDA. We apply this algorithm first, and after processing we get the output as a classification result. So this is the example of supervised learning. And next one is unsupervised learning. In this one we have the raw data set, but we don't know about the output, or we want machine learning to apply the algorithm into the raw data and then give us the output, but we don't label it. So we get the raw input data, we interpret, but there is no training data set. We input all the data set, and we want the algorithm to process it and then give us the output. So this type of learning, it is unsupervised learning. This is a simple example that I would like to share. This include the algorithm proposed for detection and grading of fruit. So this is for the image processing, image analysis. So the first thing is they input the image. We have several pre-processing. In our case, we input the spectra. Basically, I think most of us, we are doing on the spectral analysis. So we input the spectra, we pre-process the spectra. We want the feature extraction. So this part include PCA, or we want to do dimensionality reduction. So in this one, this is image, so we want to extract the feature of image first. But for us, this part can be the PCA. And after we apply PCA, we want to classify. So there are, in this case, we have 4 algorithms. So after we apply the algorithm, get the output as what is the fruit represent. So apple, avocado, banana, orange, and now this one is for only classification or detection of fruit type using machine learning. But they also apply the approach to grade the fruit type. So now here they use the fruit, they apply the segmentation. This part is the segmentation part. Basically it works for the images. So we don't have to do this one, but what we can do is wavelength selection. And after we select the wavelength, we classify the fruit according to the wavelength, and then we can rank it as the rank 1 or grade 1 or grade 2 or defected. So this is the process that that we can apply on our data set as well. uh, I'm going fast, or how about Atan? Can you understand me until now?
Yeah, I can follow, but I think I have to listen again, you know. Yeah.
Oh,
Like what you said, the feature extraction, like
yes,
geometrical feature. So
yes.
it's like L work, king down work, right?
Geometrical feature is not like king Dao ka. For
Oh,
for L don't take the image. L have the
oh,
spectra. So
oh,
what L can do is in this part of feature extraction, she can use this one for wavelength selection or PCA.
oh.
That is how we extract the feature from the spectra. But for the geometrical feature, it represents for the image. So if now in this case L don't have the image, so she use spectra.
So the geometrical feature is like dimension or something.
Yes, Ajahn, like the shape or like the width or the length of the image of the fruit. In this case is of the fruit, because as they take the geometrical features, because you can see they want to classify apple, avocado, banana, orange. So we all
Yeah.
know that they are different in the geometrical features, right? So it will be easy for the for the classification if we use the feature that can actually separate. That I already mentioned you in this slide. The important yes, this one features are very important, that we have to know like what the object actually represent.
Okay, Sneha, I try.
Yeah, anyone can ask and raise question. There is no problem. If you have anything to ask regarding your thesis, please, you can ask. Okay, so I move forward. uh, okay, now let's see what is when you are doing a machine learning analysis. You Everyone should know what is actually the hyperparameters. In machine learning, some parameter control the learning process. It is known as hyperparameter. So when we apply SVM, random forest, KNN, we have hyperparameter. This table is from my thesis that I use. So for support vector machine have C and gamma. For random forest have an estimator, maximum feature and maximum depth. And for k nearest neighbor is near neighbors and distance. So these parameters are the very important parameter that we have to know, like how it is controlling the learning process during the classification or regression analysis. And how can we know, like uh, there is no exact value for this parameter. There is no exact value of C, there is no exact value of gamma, and there is no exact kernel function that can classify or that can give a good result in all case. So in my case I got the output of C as 53, for gamma is 0.4. So how do we get this output? Is from from the optimization of hyperparameter like grid search. This grid search is one of the very simple and in commonly used machine learning optimization technique. So in grid search, what it does is we give the range of the parameter, hyperparameter. For example, we give the range of 0 of C from 0.01 to 1000, and for gamma from 0.1 to 100, and for kernel function like radial basis function, polynomial or linear. So what it actually does is it combines the best parameter and give that provide us the maximum accuracy. So this is basically trial and error method. So it can it will evaluate the C, like each parameter, like in some iteration of C, and then if 0.01 or 0.02, then 0.02 it combines with the gamma 0.1 and then combines with the kernel function RBF. So if it gives the best result, then okay, this is the final combination of hyperparameter best suitable for my analysis. So this is trial and error method. So it does in every step and give us the optimum combination with the maximum
So,
accuracy. Yes,
yeah.
done.
So may I ask, you have to write a algorithm for grid search by yourself?
And for me, no need because in scikit-learn in Python, we already have the function of grid search. We no need to
Oh,
write. We only
oh,
apply.
oh, I see.
And
So
if you
you
know,
you
yes,
yeah, yeah. You said it's like trial and error. It mean like they will calculate how can I say it, iteration or
yes, Adan,
right?
yes, iteration, yes.
Yeah. Please continue.
Okay. So this one is for optimization of hyperparameter. And and also one more thing, when you use unscramble, there is also the function of grid search. Has anyone used before grid search in unscramble? Hello,
Yes.
anyone has used?
Yes.
Okay. So how did you get better result when you use grid search, or you get better result when you just when you don't use grid search but just use the normal SVM? Ah, not answer. Okay. So yeah, the thing is in unscramble also we have grid search. So if you want to try grid search in unscramble, you can try because it gives the best combination that we want with the good accuracy. But when you select the grid search, you have to be careful about the parameter. It should not be too high or it should not be too low. If it is too high, then it can cause overfitting, and if it is too low, then the error will be very high. Okay, so we start from the first thing, that is support vector machine. So
Excuse me, Sneha.
yes,
Excuse me. I have one question. When
yes,
you talk about a hyperparameter,
yes,
so you said it's C gamma or something.
yes.
Uh, this there are other than this or not?
It depends, Ajahn. For support vector machine, only there are two parameter, that is C and gamma, and kernel function is depend on the user, that we have to first visualize our data and then we can select which kernel function is best. And for support vector machine is only two, but for random forest is more than three parameter that I will cover later on. During random forest I will tell about the hyperparameter.
Okay, thank you, Sneha.
Done. Okay, so okay, support vector machine. So SVM can be used for both classification and regression problem, including signal processing, image recognition, and there are many more application of SVM. And it can be used for both linear and non-linear data set. So I will not go into deep for the mathematical analysis of SVM, because for that one I recommend everyone to please go through the book because it explains a lot on that one. because everyone understanding is different, so you can get more idea from book. If you want to go in deep about what happened, how it calculate and everything like that, so I will give the basic idea about how it works. And the objective of SVM is to find the hyperplane that to the best degree possible separate data point from of one class from those to another class. So basically hyperplane is a plane line and it have margin. So how the SVM try to find the best hyperplane, and the best hyperplane that separate the classes or that separate the two group of samples. So here, so there are like hyperplane can be many hyperplane for two data set. So how to find the best optimal hyperplane? So from this figure, I think anyone can say which is the best hyperplane, right?
B.
Yes, we saw B. B is the best hyperplane for this one. Okay, but what happen if it become like this? Now it can separate A, B, and C. Both can separate, but like hyperplane, this A, B, and C, there are three hyperplane which can separate. But now the question is, how can we know like which one is the best? So in this note, there is one rule of thumb to identify the best hyperplane is by maximizing the margin between the nearest point or the support vector. So this is the support vector that is near to each other. So 1, 2, and 3. So we have to think about how can we maximize the margin between the support vector and the hyperplane that has the maximum margin and that can separate the support vector is the best hyperplane for the SVM. And now, okay, so C has a high margin compared to A and B. So in this case, C is the right hyperplane to separate star and circle. What happens if like it can separate star and circle, but we have two hyperplane A and B, and now we can see that B have high margin than A, but A can separate better than B. So how do you think about this one which can separate? Which is the best hyperplane? L, June, you already have learned about SVM. You can answer this one.
A is the best one.
Okay, and how about L?
We have to calculate the
So,
summary.
hmm?
We have to calculate like at the summary of the distance. I mean, like at the summary of distance.
Okay. So, yes, the answer is A. SVM select the hyperplane which classify the classes accurately prior to the maximizing margin. Maximizing margin is the second priority for SVM. The first priority is to classify the class accurately. So in this case, hyperplane B has a classification error and A has classified all correctly. Therefore, the right hyperplane is A. Okay. I would like to ask one question to L. L, can you please come near to your mic because your voice is very small. Hello?
Okay, can you hear?
Okay. You remember like last time when we have a question from Ajahn Kung about what happened if the sample come around here? Can you see?
Can.
Yes. So the answer for that one is that is the outlier. You understand my point?
Yes.
Okay, and when SVM try to learn from your data set, if some sample come around here, which is like not possible for the linear line or linear hyperplane to classify, then it automatically detect it as an outlier, and then it exclude from the training set. So this is also one of the important thing that we have to know.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Uh, 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 you mean the star sample will be in the group of the red sample, right?
No, Ajahn. If this one is okay, because now A is the best hyperplane, right? It can separate
Yeah.
star and the red circle one. But what
Oh,
happen if this star is here?
oh, I see.
Yes. So
So
in
you
this,
ask, so you
yes,
ask, how to get the hyperplane?
yes.
Oh,
So
okay.
in this case, that is outlier, and SVM have the feature to detect it. So it can detect by itself.
I see, I see.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this is the like a actual uh, picture of how SVM does the work. So it has a decision boundary, and the that has the margin from the maximum margin that can separate the support vector of one group to other group. So this is the hyperplane, and this one is for the linear classification. There is one example here, yes, like this one. So it can separate the training set, the model that is developed from training set. It can separate the test set like accurately by 100%. So this is the example of linear classification model. But what happens if we have sample like this? So this is not a linear problem. So we cannot use the linear hyperplane to classify the data set in this case. So in this situation, so we have an advantage from SVM that use the kernel trick. So basically the kernel trick is it is used to for the non-linear data set, and the kernel function map the data to a different and often high dimensional space, and then it makes it easier for the class to separate in another dimension. You can see in this one, like the input feature is in one plane, but when we project the sample into the feature space into the next higher dimension, you can see that the hyperplane can separate. So this is the kernel trick of SVM, and it has some very extremely complex transformation of input data set and process to separate the data based on the output label. And there are three type of kernel that are used for SVM. First one is the radial basis function. This kernel trick is widely used for the machine learning. And linear is uh, is good, but it is not used if it is not the linear case. So in non-linear situation, we use RBF, sigmoid, or polynomial kernel function. Mm, okay. Okay, so that was the case of the solved classification using RBF of the problem that I already showed before. So now here they use RBF to classify. So yes, we can see that there are still error in training set, but it is possible to classify even the nonlinear data set using these functions by SVM. Okay, this like Achan asked me before, like how many hyperparameter are there for SVM. So there are two hyperparameters. One is the penalty parameter, is called C, and it controls the smooth boundary decision and classify the training point correctly. And another one is gamma. Gamma is for RBF kernel function, and this parameter is used to fit the training data set, and gamma decide how much curvature we want in the decision boundary. So curvature in this case means this one, how much we want, what happen if the value is too high, or what happen if the value is too low. And C decide how accurately it can the training set can classify the samples. If C is too high, then the problem will be that if the large value of C, then there are few training errors, and then the margin will be very small. But if the value of C is uh, C is low, then there will be a little bit high error. So we have to be very careful when we select the range of C. It should not be too high, it should not be too low. And that applies same for gamma as well. Like when we use the gamma range, we have to make sure that it is proper gamma range for the model. If not, then there will be the overfitting or underfitting of the model. And when we apply the model for prediction of like unknown data set, then it cannot work properly. So these parameters should be optimized in a proper way. Later on during the programming, Sumesh will also tell you about the C and gamma, like how much we give and what is the final output that we get. Okay, so this is the end of SVM. Anyone have any question, please can ask. No question, then I move forward. Okay, so let's move on to random forest. So random forest is one of the machine learning approach that is also known as ensemble learning approach. It constructs multiple trees based on random or bootstrapping sample. What is bootstrapping sample? We will learn it in the next slide. And it can generate non-parametric models, and for both classification and regression problem. So ensemble the decision tree. The bagging method, bootstrapping sample is the main term that we have to know for the random forest. So before random forest, we have to know what is the decision tree. So this is a simple example of decision tree. We have root node, we have node, we have node, we have leaf node, we have leaf node. This is the basic structure of a simple decision tree. So root node is the head, like a father, and then it comes with the node. So this one is the children node. And finally we get the leaf node, which is the output. For our data set, I will give a small example on how to construct a decision tree first, because to understand random forest, we have to understand how the decision tree works. So in our case, in spectral analysis, we have wavelength, and Y we have the value of like DM, TSS, or in this case I use ripeness level, unripe, ripe, or overripe. So basically now I have only shown the example of ripe and unripe. So we have three column of wavelength and then one column of ripeness value. So in decision tree, first we have to know which one is among the wavelength 1, 2, 3 until n. We have several wavelengths, so we have to know first which one is the root node, which one is good for the root node. So in this case, if we select wavelength 1 as the root node, then how it develop the decision tree? First one, when we have the data set, the first step is to organize the data set, the wavelength data set into the ascending order. And second one is we calculate the average with the adjacent sample of each wavelength. Adjacent sample, that means for this one, for this row, for sample number 1, we have 0.2 and 0.3. So we calculate the average of this one. Similarly, for 0.3 and 0.1, we calculate the average of this one. And then after we calculate the average, we have to get the Gini index. So this index represent the probability of wavelength which have the lowest impurity. So we call it impurity. And for the Gini, like a first node, for the Gini, we calculate 1 minus probability of ripe and probability of unripe. So we calculate the Gini of each one for 1, for 2, for 3, and then we get we have to know which one is the lowest Gini impurity from this one. And then we use that wavelength as our root node. So when we get the root node, first one, when we the step are like arrange it in ascending order first, calculate the average average of with the adjacent sample for each wavelength, and then calculate the Gini impurity for each wavelength, and then we will know like which one should be the root node. And after we get the root node, there is always the threshold value like for each node. And from this threshold value, we can separate like which one, like how many sample is ripe, how many sample is unripe, if it is true. And if it is false, how many sample is ripe, how many sample is unripe. So first we calculate the Gini, and then we calculate the root node, and we apply the same thing for this one now. For the true ripeness, this sample, for this node, we apply again the same process for the each wavelength, and then after that the tree grows on like that one. It has many branches, many nodes, and finally we get the one decision tree that is suitable for the training data set. Okay, so yes, for now, for each leaf node, it figure out how well other wavelength can separate 20 ripe and 30 unripe sample. So it is the same process by calculating the Gini index, and then we check the Gini impurity in each node, and based on this, it proceed to grow the node or leave the node. And so in this one, okay. So we calculate the Gini impurity of this one first, and we calculate of this one. If the Gini impurity of this is low, then this one, okay, so we select this one for further analysis. But when we calculate Gini impurity of this set, and then for this set, if this one is lower than this one, we no need to go further for this branch. We stop there. and after that we proceed for this one only. So it become like this, become the leaf node in that case, and we go for this, we compare for this node and for this node, and if it is lower than the original, than the gene impurity of this node, then we stop here. So it grows like how much is the gene impurity for each node. Okay, so this is the basic of decision tree. And what happen if we the decision tree have one disadvantage, that is when we train our sample using a decision tree, we it tries to overfit the training data set. It will work for that data set, but when we normally input the unknown data set, it fails to identify or classify because of the overfitting of data. And to solve the disadvantage of decision tree, random forest is the advanced decision tree. So in this case, we have several data set, like we have different wavelength and we have different sample. So what happened here is it create like a individual trees. There are many trees in a forest, so it create the tree randomly. So it doesn't in decision tree, what happen is we use all the sample at once to create one big tree, but here we use the we use the data to train the individual tree. Like you can see, like first tree it includes sample 1 3 4, second tree it includes sample 3 5 8. So it is not the same sample, it is the random sampling. So this one is known as bootstrapping the data. So in random forest, we train individual tree based on these data set, and the bootstrapping data can be replaced or without replace. Sample number 3 can be 2 times in same tree, because it provide us the advantage that we can replace the sample, or we no need to replace the sample. So it can be repetitive, and we train the individual tree first. So how it train the individual tree? So this is tree number 1. It has feature wavelength 1 to 4 and have sample 1 3 and 4. So what happened here is when we train the individual tree for root node, how to select the root node? So for root node, it calculate the Gini indices, but first it calculate from the random feature, like okay. So for this x3, right? It select x3, but it select x3 from x1, x3 and x4, not from all data set. So here is also the randomness that we can see. So in this case, it select x3 based from x1, x2, x3 and x4. And from this one, for this node, it select x1, but it is from x1, x3 and x4, the same set, but it select different features. So based on this feature, and it proceed to calculate the Gini indices, and then the leaf grow on for individual tree. And when we have several trees, it can give us the random, it can combine all the random features and then give us one robust output. This is one of the advantage of random forest. It takes a little bit more time to process for random forest, but it can create the robust model because of its randomness. It does not depend on only one training data set that we have to use, but it use the different data set, and from the same training data set we can have different random samples. So the same process is repeated for all tree, and the majority voting is done from each tree for final prediction. So for prediction of the new sample, for classification problem, the prediction is done on the majority voting of the individual tree, and for the regression problem, the prediction is done based on the average numerical value. These are the hyperparameters that you will use in programming for random forest. An estimator is the number of trees in the forest. So how many trees that you want to build in a forest. Maximum feature is maximum number of features considered for splitting a node. So like this one, how many feature you want to take for one node. For here, I take only three feature and then selected the best one. For here also 3 features selected the best one. So you can optimize this hyperparameter based on how many feature that you want to select. Maximum depth is the maximum number of label in each decision tree. It can go on and on, like we have to stop at some label. So we have to set like how many label that you want to go on for single decision tree. And minimum sample split is minimum number of data point placed in a node before the node is split. So how many data point that you want to select for the minimum data point that you want to select in a node before it split into the other node. And minimum sample of leaf. This leaf and leaf are like same thing. We can call it leaf node or leaf node. So there is please don't get confused on this one. And bootstrapping, yes, the method for sampling data point with or without replacement that I already explained about. We can use the same sample in one tree 2 or 3 times, or we don't want the replacement, then we use no replacement. Okay, yes, this one is a simple example of random forest, how it construct the trees. So we have the training data set, we have the individual random subset of each data set first. We construct first tree, second tree until n tree, and we can input how many tree we want here in our programming. And then we predict like from tree 1, what is the output. And this output comes from the majority of this node. Like this is the leaf node, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. The root node have outgoing arrow, and the leaf and the node have incoming array and outgoing array. But for the leaf, the last node, we have incoming but we don't have outgoing because this is already the decision from this one. Okay, now we leave it here because the gene impurity is not different, so it's okay, finished here. So we count 1, 2, 3, 4. So for example, if it say unripe, unripe, ripe, ripe, the majority will be the average 2 for unripe, 2 for ripe. And if it count unripe, 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 and ripe, the outcome will be unripe. So this is the way that how it predict. And from each node we get prediction 1, prediction 2, prediction n, and the aggregate of single prediction give us the output. So this is the gist of random forest. So anyone have anything to ask about this one?
May I ask, you know, I don't know much. I cannot understand much
Yes.
about your teaching, but may I ask a little?
Yes.
Like you see the aggregate of a single trees prediction.
Yes.
Can you tell us the like Give example of the aggregate of single tree prediction. Why single tree? Why? Because we have many tree already.
Yes, Adan. We have many tree, but for like a individual sample, uh, if we want to know, like for sample number one, this we have to know this is the prediction, this is the training data set, and what we want in here is the outcome of the data set. So when we make them develop the model, this is going on inside the model, right? So when we input the unknown sample or unknown spectra, then it start in every tree. It start to go in tree number one, tree number two, tree number three, and it get the aggregate of the unknown data set. Okay, this one for from tree number one, it say is unripe, it say unripe, this say ripe. So now the aggregate will come like unripe. You understand my point? Because this one is this show how the training data set develop the forest. But if we input sample in that forest, can it predict that that sample is which class, unripe class or ripe class? So what it does, it goes to every tree, 1 2 3 until n tree, or it goes to every wavelength. In our case, this is wavelength. So it goes to the random subset one. This is wavelength number one, wavelength number two, wavelength number three, and each wavelength can give the result. And finally, it can predict whether the unknown sample is ripe or unripe. This aggregate is for one sample. It is showing for only one sample.
Please speak again. You said this aggregate is for only one sample.
For example, like if we make the model by using random forest, right? And then we have the model separate, and then we want to know the unknown sample. What is the classification of this sample? Then we input the sample in this forest, and then this forest have different trees, right? So these tree, like it say like tree number one, it say it is unripe, tree number two it say ripe, tree number three it say unripe. Then it come like the aggregate of the voting, maximum voting from the tree.
So I will study your lecture again. You will still continue.
Okay, and okay, so this is for RF, and moving forward to LDA. So linear discriminant analysis, it is an subspace method focusing on finding projection of the original higher dimension space to a lower dimension space. So there is some similarity between PCA and LDA, because LDA and PCA, they both work for the dimensionality reduction and finding the projection line. Similar to PCA, LDA also try to find the projection line that can separate two class. And for linear discriminant analysis, we can do LDA for classification problems. So there are basically, if we have two samples, then the step for LDA analysis will be first, uh, sample A and sample B, we calculate the variance within the group. So within sample A and within sample B, we calculate the variance first, and after that we calculate the variance based between group. That means the variance from A and variance from B, and finally it find the projection projection with the line that maximize the variance between group and minimize the variance within group. So in this way, LDA finds the projection line that can separate two classes, and it constructs the lower dimension space using Fisher's criterion. This Fisher's criterion is one of the criteria that is used by the founder of LDA, and they use this one for constructing the lower dimension space. Here is one example that you can see for the wine data that is classified by using LDA and by PCA. So here we can see the difference between LDA and PCA. The classification is performed very well using LDA, but not by using PCA. This is because in LDA we consider the variance between class and within class. So it maximizes the distance between one class and another class to construct the projection line. But for PCA, we have only the variance between, not with, the variance within the group, not between the group. So that is the reason why PCA can separate, but it cannot separate the group and then increase the distance between the groups. For LDA analysis, this is one of the advantage that we can get from LDA, that we can separate and we can see the samples that we can visualize the sample how it is separated using LDA. In LDA, normally we use two algorithms to decompose the data. First one is the singular value decomposition and NIPAL. I think everyone is familiar with NIPAL and SVD. And we select the number of component or number of axes. That is the projection line. How many projection line we need to separate the group. So the projection of line, it should be the total number of group minus 1. If we have 3 group, then we have 2 projection line. So when we want to estimate the new sample set or new input which which class it belongs, then it calculates the probability of that sample to be in first class or in second class, and the highest probability gets we get the output from the highest probability that is predicted by LDA, and the probability is calculated by using Bayes theorem. So to understand what is Fisher's criterion and what is Bayes theorem, I recommend everyone to please go through the book, because the theory, the calculation or mathematical part for this one is different from author to author. So you can follow one book and then understand what actually is Bayes theorem and what actually is the Fisher's criterion. Today I focus on what you will see in the programming part, because if you don't know the basic of how it is doing and what it is doing, what is why it is using SVD or what is the number of component, then it will be a problem to analyze the data. So for now, we have to focus on what we will use in programming. So you will see later on what decomposition method Sumesh will use for the LDA and how many number of component is there, and you can understand from programming, and then you can apply it to your data set. So yes, this one K nearest neighbor is one of the very simple technique. It is based on the Euclidean distance between the test sample and predefined training set. everyone has learned about the simple formula of distance. So here is one simple example, and yes, in this graph it shows like if we have two data set, category 1 and category 2, and then there is one sample, this is new data point. Now in KNN what happen is we have to specify the nearest neighbor, how many neighbor we want, how many neighbor we can use to classify the sample, the new sample set. So if we have 3 neighbor, from here it start to calculate the distance to the nearest neighbors, 1 2 3 in this case. So it will start to calculate the distance from here to here, here to here, here to here, and the distance, and after we calculate the distance, the nearest or the smallest distance and the sample that belongs to the to category 2, it shows that it has the small uh, low small distance. So it also it count the voting. It is also based on voting, like okay, this star 2 star have the low distance than this star, so okay, we say that the new data point belongs to category 2. If it comes here, then we can calculate the distance in the similar way to the near neighbor, and then count the majority voting based on the smallest distance. KNN is very easy to understand actually, and then it is easy, but if there are huge data set, and if it is like in the case of non-linear problem, sometimes it can work well, but most of the time the results are not good for spectral analysis. But still I apply KNN on my data and I got the lowest result from KNN, the not the lowest, the poor result from KNN. So this part is the basic introduction for the machine learning part from SVM, random forest, LDA, and KNN. If you have any question, please you can ask, and then if not, I will move to ANN. Or we can take a break of 5 minutes if you want. Anyone?
Yes, please. I also would like to say, Sneha, maybe you have to have a drink or something to rest. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we rest. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
5 minutesนะ 5 minutes
Okay, 5 minutes ค่ะ
ค่ะ
Hello อาจารย์
Yes.
Okay.
We are enjoy your lecture.
Thank you ค่ะ
Yeah.
I'm afraid that if like when I teach maybe it's too advanced or not. If it is too advanced, then a little bit difficult to understand for everyone.
No, you teach and we can listen again. English is our problem, but we can learn again because we record your lecture already. Yeah.
ค่ะ. So shall I continue, because my part is theory and then I will give the basic idea of how it works. But for Sumesh it might take a little bit more time, because everyone have to follow him and then open MATLAB and then do the programming with him.
Yes.
So everyone have MATLAB already in their laptop, right?
Yes, I have. I thought everybody have.
Okay, and then I recommend everyone to you can prepare some data set for yourself, for your data, and then do the programming with Sumesh, and then you can maybe you will be able to get the output, like the result today, and tomorrow you can follow him and then do it on your own data set. If you have already prepared, then it is very good.
Yeah. The data set we have from piece of from Dr. Jesada data. Last time he taught, and I get the data. He gave the data of the biomass pellet.
Oh, yes, I understand that one, but if like L June, if you have your data set, your spectra and your wet lab with you now, is better you use that data set to analyze your own data. You can get the
Oh,
result.
I see.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, but my data is only spectrum is not hyper spectrum is okay.
Says I say spectra, not hyper.
Oh, okay.
Because Sumesh don't teach about hyperspectra, he teach about the NIR spectra, only spectra. So you can prepare X spectra and wet lab.
Is how many sample if you think is okay?
How many sample you have is okay.
Oh, but it's I prepare in the Excel, right? Or
uh,
unsample?
can prepare in Excel, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will tell later.
You can keep your data set, and then Sumesh will tell you how to use
Oh,
Excel, or like how to import from Excel to MATLAB, and then you can analyze.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and okay, so I will finish ANN, and then we can have break for lunch, and then start programming after lunch. Is it okay?
Okay,ค่ะ.
Yes.
Okay. So moving to ANN. Artificial neural network. When we listen artificial neural network, we think about very complex neural network, like a very complex thing, but it is somehow similar to our human thinking system, like it is connected to our brain. And an artificial neural network is component of artificial intelligence, AI. That means it simulates the functioning of a human brain. So it simulates like how a human brain can think. And the processing unit make up ANN. That means the processing unit consists of input and output. And the input are what the ANN learn from to produce the desired output. When we keep the input, that is our training data set, ANN learn from our training data set, and then it provides the desired output that we want. And there are different methods that we can use for ANN. And ANN is the first deep learning method that was introduced. And deep learning, and when we talk about ANN, it is deep learning. So ANN and then convolution neural network, CNN. Now May is using CNN for her dataset. I use ANN for my dataset. So it is basically the same thing, like input, processing, and output. But the architecture of ANN, architecture of deep learning can be different according to how we use it, according to what algorithm we use. And backpropagation is the set of learning rules used to guide artificial neural network. Like it is backpropagation, that means moving backward and then moving forward. So this is how it learns in artificial neural network. The practical application of ANN are far and wide. We have many applications which have finance, personal communication, industry, and we are in education. So we use ANN for our data set, and then we want to know if it can produce the output for the regression analysis, or it can produce the output for classification analysis. So basically, in a neuron structure, we call the neuron. Neuron is the nerve that we have in our body system, and neuron structure combined in layers. So basically, in ANN we have 3 layers. If it is a multi-layer ANN, we have 3 layers. First layer is the input layer. It is the layer set up the initial data into the system for further processing by subsequent layer of artificial neurons. So this is the initial input that we give in this layer. Second one is the hidden layer. This is the intermediate or the between layer of input and output layers. In this hidden layer, the input layer, the data that we give in the input layer, they add some weight, and then they add some bias, and then they give the they give the output by the activation function. So this activation function, we will follow it in another slide. And the last one is the output layer. So this is the last layer that gives us the output of the program that we design. Here is one simple structure of comparison between biological neural network and artificial neural network. So we are not so much familiar with the biological system because we all come from the engineering and then we learn more about mathematics. But this is the simple diagram for that compare between the biological neural network and artificial neural network. So basically what happened is like from neuron 1 to neuron 2, we have different thing going on between in our system, in our body. Similarly in artificial neural network also the same. We have input, this one, we have input, and then each input is given some weight. So this weight, it evaluate how important is this input for for producing the output. And from here we get the weight of we provide the weight to every input. And from this one, after in the processing element, we have like the equation or like the function that we want to use for this input weight. And after that we have the transfer function, and we get the output in the form we get the desired output based on the processing element and the transfer function. So in biological system, we say neuron, dendrite, axon, synapse, and slow. But for artificial, we say node, input, output, weight, and fast. So this one and this one is like a comparison between how artificial neural network was developed and what is the idea of this one. So why we say is neural network, because it is connected and it is the idea that we get from our body, but we apply it in the machine now. This is
Excuse me, Sneha.
yes,
In this slide, could you please give the example like what to, in our case of
yes,
study, you know, like what is should be x and what is weight and something like that. Please give example.
yes, Azan. For this case, our x is our wavelength, right? And for each wavelength, the system, the artificial neural network, it provide the weight. It is related, the weight is related to the input that we provide in each wavelength, that is absorbance, right? So it detect like how much important is this wavelength, and then it provide the weight according to the importance of this wavelength. And finally, when we add the weight to each input, if the input is 0 and we provide the, if the input is 0, and then when the weight is provided to 0, it is nothing. But if the input is 1, then we provide the weight according to the 1, according to the number that is in input. And if the input is 2, then it is higher than 1, so it provides the weight like based on how important number 2 is than number 1. And then finally we get the output. This y is, it can be for classification, it can be like the case of ripe unripe, like that. And for the regression analysis, it can be TSS value or DM value or color component. So it depends on what we are doing, what analysis we are doing. So basically in all case, our input will be our wavelength. That is the feature of spectra. So even in SPM, even in RF, even in ANN, we all input is the wavelength.
May I ask again? Like you said, the Y1, Y2, TYN.
Yes.
This Y is the Y of each sample,
Yes,
or
each
the
sample.
Y of each sample, right?
Yes.
And it can be Y1 can be right, Y2 can be unright,
Can be
like that,
unripe.
right?
Yes, yes, yes. Depend.
And Y1 can be 12 bricks, or Y2 is uh 18 bricks, like this, like, right?
Yes, yes, because x1 is, it represent wavelength of sample number 1. So it give the weight to x1, and then it produce the output y1. So it depends. If x1 have TSS 13, then it gives the output similar to 13 or 14, like that. It is the predicted output that we get.
I see. Thank you, Sneha.
Done. And this one is the example of the linear ANN. This is only the binary, only single layer It don't have many layer, it have only input, and then we give the sum, and then weighted sum, and then unit step function is like a function that I mentioned here, activation function. This one in this case is the unit step function, and finally we get the output from the input that we give. It is single layer. But what happens if we have multiple layer or multi-layer? Then it happens like this one. This is the structure of ANN that have the multiple layer: input layer, hidden layer, there are two hidden layer, and then output layer. For a little bit detail on weight and bias, like how the weight is important and how bias are created for each input data. So weight control the signal between two neurons, that is the signal between the input and output. So in other words, like decide it give us the influence of the input that will have on the output. So our input is our wavelength and our absorbance data, and then what is the influence of that data on output? That is the prediction or classification. And we have to add the bias. It is a simple formula like for the linear function y equals to mx plus c. So in this case, y is the output, x is the sample, and then m is the weight that we add, and then plus bias, we have to add bias, and normally the bias have the value 1. So bias unit are not influenced by the previous layer. That means that they do not have any incoming connection or anything, but they do have outgoing connection with their own weight, because it is added after we add the weight on the input layer and then we combine it with bias. So it don't have any relation with the input layer, but it have the relation with the hidden layer. And the bias unit guarantee that even when the input are 0, there will still be the activation in the neuron. For example, in this one, we don't have bias unit because we don't have hidden layer. So if the input is 0, then the output will be 0. But in this case, even if the input is 0, we have the bias, so there will be the activation function. The neuron or we call this mesh as a neuron. So this neuron will activate, and then it will give some kind of output. So this is the reason why we have to add bias to our we have to add bias in the equation. So for the activation parameter, or for the ANN hyperparameters, right, we use activation function. It defines how a neuron or group of neuron activate based on input connection and bias term. So basically the activation function is normally we use rectified linear unit or sigmoid, and there are also polynomial and linear, but we don't use activation. Linear is only for the binary classification. Normally we use for binary classification. And then there are number of layers. So how many layers that we want. And basically for input and output there are 2 layers, but hidden layers we can have 2, 3, 4. It's depend upon the performance of our data set. And there is epoch. Number of epoch is the number of times all training sample have been passed through the network during training. So we can set like multiple times, or like 2, 3, 4, or maybe 200 or 300 times that we can run the same sample, and we can pass it in the network during the training or model development phase. And we can get the we can assign the number of epoch, and the number of batch is how many number of sample in one set. If we have like suppose we have 500 sample in one set, then how many number that we want in one batch. So number of batch defines like, okay, we will have 100 sample for one batch. That means you will have five number of batch of sample, and for each batch the number of epoch we can assign, and then it will start the activation function, and it will start uh, the further analysis, or it will start the neuron to activate, and finally we get the output. And learning rate is the step length for gradient descent update. Normally what happen is, here I show this one. So when the this is called the learning graph. So when we start to learn, it will start from the beginning. Okay, we got this one, this one, this one. So this one is the minimum loss. We call this the gradient descent. So in learning process, learning rate, the step length for gradient descent update, like when is the gradient descent or when is the minimum error. Normally in our term we call it error. So learning rate defines the step length for gradient descent update. These terms are a little bit complex, but when we understand what actually is happening in ANN, we can understand like every term here. So it's not very difficult to understand, but we have to learn a little bit more and a little bit in detail to understand each and every algorithm for deep learning as well as machine learning. So yeah, this function and this parameter you will again see in when you do the programming. And there are some graph that I and Sumesh will explain when while he is doing the programming part. We will get the result, and we will know like how ANN create the learning graph, what is the learning graph, what is the number of epoch, and how it is calculating the graph. Everything we will discuss it when we have actual graph. So yeah, that time also I will be with Sumesh and I will explain more detail on the graphs. So okay, this one is for my part. Thank you very much. And what happened here? Ah, okay, so anyone, if you have any question or any doubt or anything, please you can ask.
Nobody asked. I also have no question. But after listen again, maybe I will ask you personally. Yeah.
Okay, if
Right.
when I will share this PowerPoint to you also, and I will add note,
Yeah, please.
and then you can when I speak, it might be difficult to understand, but when I write and give reference, it will be easier for everyone to understand.
Oh, thank you very much, Sneha. And now can we see your face?
Can
So everybody will know Sneha Chama. Hi.
Hello,
Hi,
This is
Nice to see your face.
I cannot see your face,
I cannot show my face.
So now we have 7 member. Piece of who is Bunyadit?
He is the doctoral candidate of Ajahn Lavipat.
Ah, okay, okay. I know him. Okay.
Yeah.
So Smith will start after lunch, right?
Yeah.
Or you want to give some?
Like up to Ajahn.
Yes. Everyone, please tell us, like, if you are hungry, then we can have a lunch first, or he can start to teach the basic first.
Now we have like 30 minutes till 12 o'clock.
Yes,
So
Ajahn.
my opinion is please Sumit tell us what we should prepare before he start teaching in the afternoon.
Okay. Okay. Okay, Smith. Piece of. May I ask you something about not uh,
Not now.
something about the wavelength selection. Why you selected only 6 for durian?